Normally I shoot this stuff during the day, and this room is absolutely filled with light, and then I just use my one big light for a little bit of, extra light on me, and natural light just fills the entire room, so it looks pretty spectacular. This is not quite as good. I literally have every light on in this room, including my big light, and it still doesn't seem to be quite enough light, but we're going to roll with it anyhow. So 2 things I want to talk about today. Number 1, I want to talk about my DJI Spark here. I've had him for about a month now, and last week he took a major tumble, and I'm talking major tumble. Not really any worse for wear. He has a couple little cosmetic nicks on his props, and that's really about it. The gimbal, you can see it has a bit of a more of a pronounced tilt to the one side. And I went back and looked at pictures and video that I first took of the device when I got it. And it always seemed to have, with the power off, always seemed to have a little bit of a tilt to it, but now it just seems a bit more pronounced after the epic crash. So the other thing I want to talk about is I watched a DJI Spark review by Philip Bloom, and I watched that on the weekend, and it was a Spark review that was filmed entirely with a DJI Spark. And I thought it was a really unique perspective, and you got to see tons of DJI Spark footage. Obviously, the whole thing was shot with a Spark, which is really cool. But also, some of the things he did with it just made me think about different ways of using this device. So I want to talk about that a bit too today. So yeah, let's get going. So the first thing I want to talk about today is that review that I watched from Philip Bloom. And most of you probably are familiar with Philip Bloom. I mean, he's a pretty amazing filmmaker, and he also, obviously flies a lot of drones and things like that. But so he did this review that was filmed entirely with the Spark. And I really enjoyed it, and I think there were a few reasons for that. First off, I mean, he filmed the whole thing with a DJI Spark. So, I mean, how cool is that? But second to that, I think, and probably more important, I think, it was really neat to see what he did with it. And he was, because the device is so small, he was flying it through trees and under bridges and, near the water, just, over underneath a hanging branch and things like that. And that really started to twig some stuff in my head, thinking that, well, maybe its specialty is going to be fitting into those nooks and crannies that the bigger drones just can't get into. So I'm quite excited about that. I think after watching his video and seeing what he was doing with it, I think I'm going to try to maybe squeeze into a few more of those nooks and crannies, and see if I can get those perspectives and those unique shots that other people are not getting with bigger drones. And I think the other thing too is he just really had a good time flying this drone. He said it multiple times throughout that this is the most fun he's ever had flying a drone, and that resonated with me as well. So of course it was a review, and he did speak to some of the things that he didn't quite like with the Spark. And I think battery life, which everybody knows is pretty short at about 16 minutes. I think that was a bit of a downside for him. But also he spoke about video modes. Right now, the Spark only shoots at 1080p, 30 frames per second. And Philip thought, well, it'd be pretty nice to have 25 frames per second or 24 frames per second, so you can get more of that cinematic look and natural movement with your video. As well, he talked about, it'd be nice to have color profiles. Right now, it's basically what the video that comes out of your Spark is set to a particular profile that DJI has set, and that's it. So for his taste, he found it to be overly sharp, I think overly saturated, and perhaps a bit too contrasty. And he's kind of hoping that there's going to be a flat profile, so all untuned. You can take that raw, flat video, bring it into your favorite editing software, and then you can tweak it exactly to your tastes. So overall, I think it was a very unique review, and I really enjoyed watching it. And I've watched it a few times now because it was just so enjoyable to watch and see the footage, and even get some ideas, from someone who really knows what the heck they're doing. So yeah, the link will be in the description. So yeah, check it out. It's really cool. Okay, so let's talk about the crash. So yeah, I was out last weekend in the mountains, and I pulled out Sparky here for a little shot, and I really like using the intelligent flight modes. And I had used 3 of those 4 modes, And last week I tried to do the helix maneuver. So the helix maneuver, you basically set yourself as a target, and the drone is going to fly around you, spiraling out and up as it goes away, keeping you in the frame. So before I launched the full-on helix and just kind of let it do its thing, I brought the drone up a few times, and I just tried it just to see what the maneuver was going to do. And I was in a pretty open field. I mean, there were trees on the borders, but I thought I had a ton of space to deal with. So when I thought I had everything figured out, I kind of just, I got him up to altitude, which I thought was, enough clearance for any trees around me. And I punched the button and I just let him go. And for whatever reason, I was just kind of extra cocky that day, and I wasn't paying attention to the drone. Normally every other time that I have launched an automated maneuver, I have kept my eye on the drone. But this particular day, I didn't do that. So instead, I wasn't even looking at my phone to see where this thing was headed. I was just sitting there. I don't know, I think I was tired because it was about a 30-kilometer bike ride we did that day. So I think I was kind of tired, and I was just kind of vegging out, and I was just going to wait for the drone to kind of stop doing its thing. And so she looked up in time just to see it hit the tree, and she couldn't even speak or react, because you could just punch a button and stop the maneuver, but there was no time to react. By the time she saw it, boom, it hit the tree. And I'm telling you, this thing hit every single branch on the way down. Didn't miss one. So I didn't panic too badly when it hit the tree. I mean, I thought right away, well, that's pretty stupid. This is going to cost me some money, and I was okay with that. I think my bigger worry was, this thing probably hit, I didn't look at the flight logs, but I'm guessing it was about 80 to 100 feet up in the air when it clipped the top of this tree. And I was more worried that it was going to get stuck, 60, 70, 80 feet up in the air, and I wouldn't be able to get it back. So I wasn't the one who found it. Jen actually found it. She kind of heard it humming in the bushes there. And when I first picked it up, it didn't really look any worse for wear. It had a little bit of, a green tree stain or grass stain on it, and you could see a few nicks in the props, but nothing major. The only thing I did notice is my gimbal had this slight tilt to it. Now, my gimbal kind of seemed to have a slight tilt since day one, but after the crash, when I just kind of launched it quickly after the crash just to see if it would fly and how it would work. And it did fly, but there was definitely something wrong with the gimbal. It didn't seem to actuate properly. So back at home, I plugged it in, got it up to a full charge, and then I started playing around with it. And one of the first things I did is, kind of when you push the power on. So it has a bit of a tilt to it. When the gimbal's resting, it has movement to it. And for me, my gimbal is always sort of leaned the one way. Like right out of the box, it's always leaned that one way. But after the crash, it was a little bit more pronounced. And so as soon as I hit the power on the device and it comes to life, the gimbal snaps to attention and it levels out. But what I was kind of noticing is after it leveled out, it still had a slight amount of tilt to it. But luckily, there is a feature in the software where you can adjust the pitch and the roll of the gimbal. So yeah, 2-axis gimbal, pitch and roll is all we got to work with here with the Spark. And yeah, so there's a software correction for roll. So that's what I did. And to do that, I got my trusty level out, and I put it on my desk to make sure my desk was level. And then I put my Spark on top of the desk, and then I wanted to make sure that my gimbal was level. And then I went into the DJI app, and I adjusted the roll until I saw that it was level again. And so what I did after that is I got the gimbal leveled, and I took it for a little flight in my condo. So I took it up for a little flight, which I've done many times before in my condo when I was first testing it. And I guess it was just one of those days, because I backed it up into, I have a paper background behind me here that I use for shooting portraits and product shots and things like that. And I was just going back and forth, getting some shots. The prop caught the edge of the paper, and the drone got slammed to the ground again. So anyhow, I went over, I picked up this drone and took a look at it, and once again, it was like unscathed and the gimbal was still intact. So yeah, after the whole, hit the paper background thing and crashed to the ground, I thought, oh geez, that's enough. I need to put this thing away and call it a day because I can't, enough, right? So I put Sparky on the ground there and I plug him into the wall and get him charging up. And just as I'm pulling back into my desk on my chair there, I hit the level that I was using to check to make sure my table was level when I was truing the gimbal, and it falls over, crashes on top of my drone, and Sparky takes hit number 3. And at that point it was almost funny, but it wasn't funny. But yeah, sure enough, okay, he survived that too. And I've done some more flying with him since all this craziness occurred, and he seems to be doing just fine. So the moral of the story is those quick shots do need a lot of room to operate. So you have to be really cognizant of that. And I had not flown the helix maneuver before. I mean, I did put it up a couple times and do kind of a couple testers, but when I went to do the production run there, I didn't pay attention, and that was also a fatal mistake too. I should have at least flown it once and watched it the whole time in the maneuver that I wanted to do to make sure it wasn't going to hit anything in its path. But the whole experience has also left me quite impressed with just how tough this Spark is. I mean, the build quality is absolutely amazing. Like it's not, cheap plastic. It is very, very rugged plastic. And you kind of groan the fact that it only has a 2-axis gimbal, but the 2-axis gimbal is probably the reason that it survived my epic crash. My buddy has a Mavic Pro and he has a 3-axis gimbal, and he took quite a minor crash and he toasted his gimbal. Like, those things are pretty fragile. Well, I certainly don't recommend crashing, but I think it's almost inevitable for a drone. Eventually you're going to run into a little bit of trouble. But it's good to know that this is a really tough, well-built drone, and it's probably going to survive most crashes. But yeah, I think I definitely need to work on my piloting skills. More practice. Yeah. And yeah, check out that video from Philip Bloom. It's pretty awesome, and maybe that's going to give you some good ideas of things that you can shoot with your Spark.